Good afternoon, my beautiful babes and babettes. I am your resident active advocate, and I'm cold. Where did the summer go? It sucks. I woke up this morning, it was 6 degrees Celsius outside, which I think I read was 43 Fahrenheit, something like that. The Fahrenheit scale makes no sense, okay? 0 is Celsius's freezing point. 100 is our boiling point. This makes sense to me. 0% heat, 100% heat. You get it? Good. But yeah, it's cold and rainy and gross today, just like in Forks, Washington most of the time. Good transition. Today, I would like to make my final video on the first book in the series for Twilight, and I will be doing a combination video on ableism and racism in this book. The reason why I'm keeping these together in this video is because neither of them is as big of an issue in this book as especially racism later becomes in the series. But I can address them both here, so I will. All right, in terms of ableism, okay, there are two main points that I want to make. The first, I want to talk about Billy Black. He's a very minor character in this book, but he takes on more of a major role in future books. He is Jacob Black's father. For anyone familiar with this series, you know that Jacob is sort of the foil to Edward. But Billy is a wheelchair user, but is also indigenous. And I kind of want to combine the ableism and racism angles here because there is a stereotype. Y'all are going to see me cringe in this video, by the way. There is a stereotype that most indigenous people will at one point end up with diabetes. And it is at least implied that Billy is a wheelchair user now because of diabetes. It's said very early in the book, he uses a wheelchair now. Okay, so implying that he was not born mobility disabled. So the implication there is that it was because of something acquired, right? Unfortunately, the stereotype being what it is, where is a reader's mind probably going to go in regards to that? Well, he's indigenous, probably he lost a limb to diabetes, and that's why he uses a wheelchair now. And a lot of people's brains will go there. That's where my brain went when I went back and reread this. That is, as I say, a racially motivated stereotype, and that is not the only aspect of either racism or ableism in this book. To stick with ableism, though, I want to say that other than the character of Billy, there is no representation of disability in this book whatsoever. There is no physical disability shown. There's no neurodivergence shown, which isn't necessarily a disability, by the way, okay? Not necessarily, but you don't see anything beyond Billy being in a wheelchair, and as I say, he's a very minor character in this book. There is no representation whatsoever. In the average population of any given place, roughly 10 to 15% of your people are going to be disabled in some way. So this would apply to physical and emotional disabilities, neurodivergence, that sort of thing. Disability, basically, is as exclusive as being left-handed. I am also left-handed, by the way, so is my sister. And disability is also as exclusive as being LGBTQ+, which is another thing, by the way, that this book does not even touch. This entire series does not even touch on the LGBTQ plus community, which is why I'm not even going to address homophobia in this series. It can't even be called homophobic because there are no LGBTQ plus characters in this book at all, in this series at all. All right? Other than the lack of representation, what you get instead is Bella's sorts of monologues about herself. And two things that I wanted to point out were that she is extraordinarily clumsy, and there is an instance where she says, "I'm so clumsy that I might as well be disabled." There is another instance where, again, attacking herself, because as we've discussed, she has very low self esteem, she says, "I pause in the conversation for so long that he must think I'm mentally deficient." Or, pardon my language, by the way, but I swear to God that's in the book. It was something along those lines or something to that effect. So, other than the total lack of representation, I want to say that the way in which this book engages in ableism is in what I would call passive ableism. It isn't so much as labeling individual people as bad because they are disabled. It's more along the lines of disability itself is bad and something to be mocked, even when the character in question does not have an actual disability. Bella does not have an actual disability, even though at one point she thinks she could, or she thinks she might, because Edward makes it clear to her, "I cannot read your mind." And the first thing she says to him, the first thing she thinks is, "Oh God, is there something wrong with me? Does my mind not work in the," I'm going to put quotation marks around this, the book doesn't, "does my mind not work in the right way?" So, what I mean by passive ableism in this sense is that it's not directed at a specific character, it's not directed at a specific group. It's more of an overall encompassing statement of disability slash neurodivergence. These are both bad things and may also be the reason why they are not given any representation whatsoever in these books. I need to go back to racism because I just remembered a thing that I would not want to neglect to mention. I have heard, I have not confirmed this, but I have heard that in the movies specifically, Stephenie Meyer asked that if there were any people of color put on screen, specifically Black people, that they be portrayed as villains, that they play villainous characters. The only Black person, as far as I'm aware, that you see in the movies is the character of Laurent. He is in the same group as the hunter James, who pursues Bella and nearly kills her. All right? Laurent is the partner of another vampire in the group. Her name is Victoria, and she becomes more of an important character later on in the books. But Laurent, in book number 2, he becomes a slightly more important character, but we will get to that. He is literally the only Black person you see in these books, or at least in the first book, and he's a villain, okay? To talk about the indigenous representation in this book, I also don't want to neglect this point. On the Quileute Reservation, every single person that they meet who is Quileute has a biblical name, except for Billy, okay? I want to point this out, though. Billy is short for William. William is a very Anglo name, all right? William the Conqueror, think of that, okay? When the invasion of England happened, that kind of made it into England. This happened in 1066, in the year 1066, under the rule of William the Conqueror. Either that or he came slightly later, but that is a very English name. It's like basically this guy is what made England English in the first place. All right, so William is a very English name, but every other person you encounter has a biblical name. Jacob, okay, that's character number 1. Sam, short for Samuel. Samuel was a prophet in the Bible. Jacob has 2 sisters. I believe their names are Rachel and Rebecca. Those were 2 of the wives of the primary Hebrew patriarchs in the Old Testament, in the Torah. All right. Pretty much everyone else you encounter has a biblical name. Until later books, you get two characters named Colin and Brady, I believe their names are. It's something like that. They're younger members of the, spoilers, wolf pack. All right. I will get to the whole idea of the wolves, okay? That doesn't come up so much in this book. Jacob is a minor player in this book, which is why I'm not really talking about him or about the very racist angle that these books end up taking, okay? Also, one thing I forgot to mention yesterday, and which I should not neglect, this is under the Edward Issues banner. Forgot to mention this, probably wanted to block it out mentally because it is extraordinarily creepy. Okay, so you know how Edward can't read her mind? Well, he follows her around without her permission and is standing beneath her bedroom window one night when he hears her talking in her sleep and hears her say his name. Bella knows that she is a sleep talker, okay? And Edward does not ask permission to do this. And even if he did, probably Bella wouldn't have a problem with it, but I would have a very, very, very big problem with this. He breaks into her room via the window because he has superhuman climbing abilities, right? He can get up the side of the building, no problem. But he gets into her room and watches her sleep and listens to her speaking because that is the only way in which he can access her thoughts. Because when you're dreaming, it's your subconscious coming out into not your waking mind, your sleep, obviously, but like your more conscious mind. I've experienced sleep talking, but only under the influence of sleeping pills or of like NyQuil, you know that stuff. It's weird. And you wake up, it's like, was I talking to myself? Right? But Bella is 100% aware of the fact that she does this. And when she wakes up and finds Edward in her room later on in the book, and she's 100% okay with it. He says to her, "You're talking in your sleep," and she's like, the only concern she has is whether she said anything embarrassing. I would be freaking out. I would be losing my mind about this stalker coming into my room and listening to me sleep talk, and not just that, but just flat out watching me sleep at all. That's creepy, okay? Unless you This is something that cinema therapy says, and I'm going to reiterate this because I think that it was a good point made. Unless you are, in a actual relationship together, one person on an equal footing with the other, and you're just sort of waking up next to each other, and one of you just sort of looks at the face of the other and goes, "Oh, how cute, how peaceful," because we're sleeping next to each other and this is a mutual agreement. You should not be doing this. Oh my god, I can't stress this enough how creepy this is. But this video is about racism and ableism, and I should try to stay there. Sorry. Had to go back for that digression, though, because I forgot to mention that yesterday. So, basically what I don't like about the ableism in this book is that, A, there is no representation of people with disabilities at all. B, someone who does not actually have any disabilities is constantly putting herself down in regards to using disability as a kind of ha sort of thing. Not exactly as a slur against herself. That's not the right word for this. But it's more like, I may as well be disabled. I'm so clumsy. It's very flippant. It's very, very dismissive of people who actually do have physical disabilities. And in terms of neurodivergence, again, incredibly dismissive because there are people who have real neurodivergent issues that may impact the daily functioning of their life, and it may impact their social skills, it may impact their emotional capacity, whole bunch of different things, because the term neurodivergence is an umbrella term, right? Covers anything from autism even to, well, I don't know whether that depression would necessarily be considered neurodivergence. That's more of an emotional disability. But, just the brain, quote, not functioning properly. That's what Bella's worried about. But she doesn't have any sort of neurodivergence that would classify as, sorry, pop up, that would classify as a disability. And the one thing that she's worried about is, how is this perfect man who I have put on a pedestal, how is he going to perceive me? Because I'm so clumsy, and I'm a total this, and oh, he can't read my mind. I must be sorry about my language, but I must be a freak. I really don't like how dismissive this book is of real life issues that can be very negative or can even be positive. I have heard people say that autism is their superpower, and that's amazing. It all depends on how you're able to work with it, how you read it yourself, how you identify yourself. It's not up to another person to identify you, nor is it up to them to look down on you for any form of disability or neurodivergence that you have. That's all. That whole ground should be yours to tread, not other people's. And certainly not in a negative way in regards to other people looking at you for what kind of differences you may have. This has been my point from the very, very beginning of this channel. Disability is not inherently a bad thing. It all depends on how it's spun and on how society works with it and on how you work with it, because at the end of the day, we're all different from one another, and it's just another form of difference. It can be very impactful, absolutely, and I will not be dismissive of that. This book is dismissive of that, and I really don't like that, because I'm going back and reading this now with the extra knowledge that I have from university and just through interacting with people online even, and it's like, you wrote this? You were allowed to write this in the 2000s? This is not good. This is not good. And I've said before, I don't really advocate for young girls, especially, to be reading these books, because it could be very detrimental to their self-esteem, to their worldview. I'm not going to censor what other people read, obviously. Every reading experience is valuable in its own right, depending on how you read the thing. But it just isn't good for a person's sense of self, for a person's self-esteem, to sort of mirror these standards onto themselves and be like, oh, well, I am not perfect, so I must not be worthy of any kind of positive attention. That's sort of the hole that Bella digs for herself, and I really do not like her characterization as it stands. As I said at the very beginning of this series, Bella is not a character. Bella is a self-insert, but also a blank slate for other girls to project themselves onto. And I really don't think that that's healthy, because she does not strike me as the kind of person I would want to be myself, as the kind of person that anyone with self-respect, especially any girl with self-respect, would want to be. And these books just are not well written either, by the way. These are painful reading experiences for me. Again, I know that this is self-aggrandizement. I can literally do better. And I'm writing my very first book right now, okay? I can do better already. Mind you, I'm 30 years old. I don't know how old Stephanie Meyer was when she started writing this series. I should probably look into that. But, alright. That's the end of this video. And on Monday, I would like to begin talking about New Moon, which in relative terms, is my favorite book in the series, because Edward's not in it. And it's so glorious. Oh, only in that regard, though. Like I say, this is a relative term. All right, so hopefully that was fun for you. It was interesting for me. And it continues to be interesting because new moon. Oh boy. There's a lot to unpack. All right, so have a lovely, wonderful, hopefully warmer than my day, and I will talk to y'all on Monday because I take weekends off. All right, see y'all later. Thank you for your lovely attention and participation. Like, comment, share, subscribe, la-dee-do, all that good stuff, and I'll catch you later. Mwah!